May is Mental Health Awareness Month, and we decided to have a little video to talk about how mold can actually cause you to have mental health issues. We are joined with Elizabeth Kripe, who is the co-founder and executive director of Malachi's Message. I am Emily Rochelle. I am the board chair, also co-founder of Malachi's Message. Elizabeth, can you go into how mold affected your mental health and your kids' mental health, and tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So basic breakdown, right? We were in mold. We hit a point, I remember at one point, where I was physically incredibly ill. We didn't know I had mast cell activation syndrome at the time. So everything was attacking my body. My body thought it was. I had hives, huge ones all over my body, my back for a month straight, which is not enjoyable. My children, one was walking into walls, one was having a bloody nose every day and literally pulling clumps of hair out of her head every day. My husband and I are, you know us, we're very, very passionate people, but we are very respectful of each other. And we hit the point where we were just angry at each other, and mold rage was incredibly real. And I remember looking around at one point after I literally was laying on the ground. I remember we have a picture, I think. I was laying on the ground because I had a migraine that was so bad on top of this. And my daughters both pulled up pillows and just laid next to me on the ground because they were so lethargic from what was going on. And I remember thinking, I can't do this anymore. Like, it would be better for my family and I would be out of pain if I just wasn't here. And I genuinely, like, if you don't know, there's a progress in suicide, right? So you think about suicide, you think, oh, I don't want to be here. You think about ways to do it. Then you actually try and do it. And I was at the point where I was trying to think about ways that I could do it where it wouldn't impact my daughters, which is incredibly, now looking back, going, well, obviously would impact my daughters. I was with them all the time. But I remember thinking, I can't do this anymore. Like, my body is so broken. Our family is so broken. Like, my husband was about to have surgery on both of his wrists, and I was just done. In the meantime, my oldest daughter was having anxiety attacks where she would sit on the ground and just have a full-blown meltdown, like not just throwing a fit, right? My husband at one point, before we realized what was happening, went, oh, she just needs to stop throwing fits. And like, we had a pretty good argument over that, going, this isn't a fit. I've seen her throw fits. This is something very different and I don't know what it is. And we didn't know we were in mold yet, to the point where she would sit on the ground and I would just hold her. Like, that was the only thing. My husband and I would have to sit with her and just hold her until she physically started to calm down. Looking back on this side of it, we see that it was mold, and we know that the mycotoxins can cross the blood-brain barrier, right? And they can cause inflammation and they can rewrite your mental synapses. Like, it's incredibly powerful the way that it messes with not just your physical body, but your mental state. And emotionally, it tanked us. I mean, still to this day, a few months ago, something happened and we thought we had mold somewhere where we're living now. And I remember my husband had a little bit of a breakdown, and he'd be fine with me saying that, but he goes, I can't do this again. Like, we're so far out of it. We're so healthy. If we are living somewhere that has it again, what are we going to do? And he regrouped, and he called me about a week later and goes, I'm in a dark place with mold today. And this is 5 years out. We're 5 years out of our original apartment from hell. So it is something that mentally, like, it's something we've had to work really, really hard at, finding ways to, like, self-care and control our mental state. In our interview with Jill Krista last week, she said mold is mean. Like, it's going to come at you and it's going to try and stick around. And mentally, it does the same thing, right? It tries to come at you. It tries to stick around. So for us, it was depression, anxiety, suicidal thoughts. I had extreme PTSD. We intentionally did not move back to this area of Texas for 4 years. My husband knew that I was not ready to move back to this area of Texas, or like, things were going to go dark really, really quick again, just because there were too many triggers here. Triggers is something a lot of people don't talk about or recognize, but that goes in line with mental health. I know we've had many conversations or just phone calls over, I'm freaking out right now, like, I'm having a trigger, and those like,
right on.
But those were for us the major, and still to this day, like, my PTSD, we've learned how to work with the triggers for me. My husband has started to grieve and started to move out of survival mode, which also falls into one of the major triggers for people for mental health with mold. Those were the main ones that we hit. My youngest daughter still, and I know I've alluded to it before, she doesn't remember much. She just remembers her stuffed animals not being there. So she has a bunk bed, and the top bunk literally is full of just stuffed animals. And we have a box in storage, because that is still the one thing, if we say we can't keep a stuffed animal, like it is weeping and sobbing and uncontrollable, like, and she doesn't even know why, but we look back and we go, well, that's still for her the one thing she remembers losing. And her brain is telling her, if you lose another stuffed animal, something horrible is going to happen. Mm-hmm. When we were in mold, she too, and this is just a neurological thing, but she ended up, and we know like UTIs and bladder infections are a huge thing, especially for kids that go through mold. And to the point that we see a specialist for it, but her brain, because she went through so much pain in that area of her life, her brain still to this day, and we've had to retrain it, tells her if she has to go to the bathroom, it tries to block that from crossing through to her body. And so it tells her, no, you don't have to go. You don't have to go. That means there's going to be pain down the road. And so we really had to work hard for her with like mentally working through, that's not true. That's not true. That's just a trauma reaction. But it's insane. Like, I didn't think before mold that something in your environment, honestly, and it still amazes me that something in your environment can have such a toll, like an overwhelming toll on your mental state and on your life, because all of those things, right, interweave into everything. Depression interweaves into everything. Anxiety, as you know, because that was something you went through, right? Was like debilitating anxiety while you were going through mold.
Yeah, so my son Sebastian was having the same meltdowns as your daughter was having as well. And it's funny because I was actually going through, whenever we were going through the lawsuit, I put together like all the text messages to show like this was an active conversation about our health, between me and my husband. And I came across the text message where I texted him. He was at work, and I said, Sebastian's doing the nonstop screaming again. I don't know what to do. I can't control this. I can't calm him down. And Josh would have to leave work to come help me because you couldn't calm him. And luckily, and this was just a blessing, even though I hated experiencing it, but I did develop also the debilitating anxiety that where I couldn't control how I was feeling. I'd end up on the ground screaming and crying. My husband would have to come home to try to help me, and he couldn't help me. I was having doom and gloom thoughts. And I say that's a blessing because now I knew when we got out of mold and we figured it was mold causing this, I knew what had happened and what was going on with my son, Sebastian. I also started to hallucinate. I was hearing things that weren't there. I was seeing things that weren't there. I also had depression. I also, just like you, whenever my son would go take a nap, I would go sit on the other side of my bed and I would try to listen to, I think it was Joyce Meyers at the time, to just have some positive, to some peace, and just because I felt like I was going crazy, and I didn't know it was mold causing me to feel like I was going crazy. But I too would sit there and just be like, my husband needs to marry somebody else.
Yeah.
He's an attractive man. He won't, have any issues. He's a great person, because like I'm not, I didn't know what was going on with me. I felt like, I just needed to like go away, and I didn't feel like I was being a good mom to Sebastian because I was feeling so sick. I couldn't really take care of him. And so, yeah, suicide thoughts also came into my head too. And then it was hard. It was really hard. And then, yeah, when we found out we were in mold, I mean, that just like, what is mold? And then you find out about mycotoxins and you're like, oh my God, like mycotoxins, like level 1, level 2 carcinogens, like these are toxins that are affecting my brain, that are affecting my son's brain, that affected all of us. I mean, it caused my dog to have seizures, who ended up passing because of it. And also my dog, Kuja, she also developed anxiety in our townhome to where we had to buy one of those vests to put on her to see if that would help her, because she developed severe anxiety. So yeah.
I hate that. And I like the other side of things too. I remember like you go through so many, just as a woman, for women out there, and probably men too, but I just know because I'm a woman, you go through so many physical changes with mold too, that you start to go through so many like self-conscious identity. You know, you went from the person that you were married when you got married, and you, like, for me, that was like my ideal self physically, and then molds happen and you start to like have inflammation. You don't know where it's coming from. You can't get rid of it. We tried so many diets, like just for inflammation. I remember that. And it mentally kind of messes with you on top of the anxiety and the depression. And as a mom, we've talked about mom guilt. I feel like that goes right in there with mental health awareness, because you're also going, I can't be the mom I used to be, and I have no clue why. So you start to feel like a failure. Unless I don't think I'm the only one that went through that, but I remember going, I can't go for a longer walk with my kids. We're at the park for a half hour and we're all exhausted. There must be something wrong with me if I can't keep us outside for longer than this. And we've talked too, mold just seems to draw you in. Like when you're in a moldy environment, you don't always want to go outside, which doesn't help. But I remember like those mental processes in the background of everything else going on too, going, man, I'm not being a good enough wife. I'm struggling as a mom. I'm not able to work. Like I would get tired. I worked at like a preschool daycare at the time. And I remember going, man, why am I so exhausted? I used to do, 5 things, and now I can barely do 2. And that mentally too, I feel like just messes with you. And even when you come out of it, you're going, okay, I know I was there, but all those things are so ingrained in you now. You have to find ways to counteract the lies that have been coming at you because of mold.
Yeah. And you mentioned the mold rage too, along with the mold rage, because that's a real thing. I also had mold rage, and my husband and I never yelled at each other. We never said bad words, like threw bad words at each other. We were very respectful of each other. And when we were in mold, I mean, I was a different person, and I would yell at him, and it was terrible. But when we got out of mold, you then become very angry, because especially if you realize people were lying to you,
Yes.
and that they're at fault for the reason why you guys are all sick. And the triggers you mentioned too, you mentioned you couldn't come back to Texas. Well, we just finally moved back to the Austin area. And, you and I've talked about this, where we were living for the last 6 years, I was surrounded by my triggers, and it was very hard for me to go out on a daily basis and not be triggered and have all these, thoughts come back, or remember this, because you try so hard to like kind of block it out, because you don't want to remember things that happened, when you were going through mold or recovering from mold, because you don't want to be sad anymore or angry anymore. But the triggers are a big thing as well. And so moving back to the Austin area has been wonderful, because all my triggers are gone.
Yeah, I love that. I'm so glad. Like, I hate that you live further away, but I'm so glad for your guys' mental health.
And then I mentioned a second ago when you were talking about triggers, the radon. I have to tell a story. Sorry. So most people know that my husband and I own Texas Mold Inspectors. We got into the industry, and I see the other side. And I see how landlords send in their own inspectors to basically lie and minimize the damages, or say there's not a problem. Well, the other day before we moved, I was in the house, and Elizabeth remembers because I called her so angry. But I got a knock at the door, and I opened the door, and there's this lady and another little guy standing with her. And she said, "Hey, I'm here to do the annual radon inspection." And I was like, "Radon? What? Are you saying we have a radon problem?" And she was like, No. I was like, well, company's not just going to spend money to, just let's go do radon testing in every single house. I mean, I started to freak out, because I was like, what is radon? I don't know what radon is. It like went back to the whole mold situation where I was like, what is mold? And so I was like, you're not coming to my house. you just told me we have a radon problem when you're saying we don't, because I know better. And so she's like, all right, we'll put this by the sink. I said, okay, fine. So I go in the house and I put it by the sink, and I immediately start looking at radon. It's like the number 2 cause for like lung cancer development. And so now I'm freaking out even more. And so I'm calling professionals in the radon industry, and then they tell me that the canister she had me placed by the sink was actually the wrong location to even place it at. Kind of like a landlord sending in their inspector to do air samples because they know they have a really good chance of having that air sample come back showing that there's not a problem, so that they can tell the tenant, oh, there's not a problem with mold because the air sample showed clear. Well, that's what she did with the canister. You're not supposed to put the radon canister to test for radon in the house in any wet areas or by a sink, because that can skew with the results. So I call Elizabeth freaking out, and I'm about to burn the house down. So long story short, luckily we had another house that we just rented in Austin. So we immediately moved up to the other house and got out of that house. But yeah, that was a huge trigger moment. I was about to flip out, burn some homes.
But you knew it. Like, you called and you're like, I know I'm freaking out because this is like mold. Like, I don't know about radon and it could be deadly. And you had a cough at the time too, I think. That was right. That was part of it. I remember freaking out for you and going, wait, if this is a trigger for her, like, okay, let's logically go through this. But it was real. It's so real. Like, triggers are a real thing, and they like that when it comes out of nowhere.
I even went outside to go find that inspector because I was like, how dare you, tell me to put this canister by the sink, skew the result.
Yeah. No. Okay. So what do? We know that mental health is real. We know that people are facing all of these things, right? Because we've gone through it. We know the countless stories you've heard, the ones we've heard. What are some things that have worked for you to help you work through some of these?
Finding somebody that you can talk to. And you were that person for me, as well as Lauren. I was blessed to have you and Lauren come into my life, because having somebody that I could actually talk to that actually understands what we've gone through, what we deal with, when we're out of mold, and the triggers, and understanding the PTSD that comes along with it with a lot of people. That is very helpful to have that person. Stepping away from the computer, not going in all the mold Facebook groups, and because they can cause triggers to come up again, or anxiety. So sometimes just taking yourself away from mold altogether, like stepping away from groups, stop thinking about mold, and just look around and focus on your life, and look at all the positives that you have today, and what can you do. One of the things that I like to do is I like to think, what can I do to make my husband's day better today? Like, we've been through so much. Like, let me remind him of one of my favorite memories, just to bring a smile to him, because, your spouse has also gone through this with you if you're married, and they're affected, and they're probably still going through things. But so trying to remind them of positive things helps me in my marriage, and not talking about mold with my husband, even though we're in the industry, we have a rule, like after 5 p.m., like no more mold, let's talk about the positives. And one thing that I learned too, and this was a really hard lesson, was when we got out of mold, every time my husband came home, I would tell him about all the negatives, about how, what the challenges were today. I wouldn't tell him about the positives, because I was in this negative mindset, and Sebastian was so affected. He was bullied so much. I was so angry a lot, like every single week, because I felt like I was having to step in and talk to a parent again about their kiddo doing this to Sebastian, to try to help Sebastian, and protect him. And so I was always negative when my husband came home. And, when you're acting like that, that's not good for a marriage. You have to stop at some point and remind and be that person, not the person, you're not the person you were before, but you can't always be talking about the negative. You got to bring in the positives, because if you don't, then it's always going to be negative. But I had to learn that because, I started to basically become just a negative in my husband's eyes. Every time he would call me, I would talk about something negative. When he came home, something negative. And that's not healthy. And so I had to really think about it from his viewpoint and realize, yeah, if I came home every day and my husband was just like negative, like I wouldn't want to be around them. And that honestly wasn't healthy for me too, to constantly be focused and talking about that. So finding ways to be positive, finding things to remind yourself of positive things, or just, so don't be negative all the time. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. Focus on positive things. Even if Sebastian was bullied, that day, I would still focus on the positive things. Obviously, I wouldn't just complain, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah. There's a balance there, right? Because you still, like you said, you can acknowledge it, but it can't be your entire dialogue all the time. I love that. Because yeah, I agree. For us, I agree. Like getting off of social media. Still to this day, I do that. There are days where I start to scroll through something and I see all the mold groups pop up, and I feel my insides kind of shake almost. And I'm like, nope, okay, not today. Obviously I work for Malachi's Message, so I do stuff from Malachi's Message that is surrounded by mold, but having outside sources come into that equation for that day doesn't happen. There are days that we've called and been like, hey, did you see this post? And nope, I'm not looking at social media today. Okay, cool. Your boundaries. That is fantastic. That was big. That still is big for us. The same thing, after 5 p.m., right? No work for me because that's mold. And we've had many conversations around boundaries. Sunlight for me with depression. I know it's super simple, but it's huge, to the point where the vehicle my husband got me had to have a sunroof in it. And it helps. There are days I get in the car and I'm exhausted and I don't want to do anything. And I know I open the windows, open the sunroof, and just the sunlight coming in, helps so much. Yesterday was a rough day and my husband goes, hey, let's go for a walk. It's sunny out. Get out in the sun, even if you don't want to. If you're fighting depression, it does help. Even if you sit in a chair and you just sit in the sun, it genuinely helps your brain. It genuinely helps your attitude.
Josh actually does that for me too. He reminds me, just the other week, because he called and I was down because I just had a conversation with somebody going through mold, and it was just, so sometimes some of those phone calls just really bring me down because of what they're going through.
Yes.
And he was like, can we just go outside and take a walk? Just go take a walk. And you're absolutely right. Just get out there, get in the sun. Even if you have to just sit outside on the sidewalk in your driveway, just get out in the sun, and just, it really does help.
It does. So, right? So much. I agree. Finding people. I mean, we've joked before, if you've ever seen Golden Girls, that's going to be Emily, Lauren, and I when we're older, hopefully with our spouses, but that's going to be us. We found our people. Find people that you can talk to that don't think you're crazy, and they can help. We have very honest, raw conversations with each other about things like boundaries, and we keep each other in check. I would say too, don't exert energy on people that you don't need to. If you are going through depression or anxiety or PTSD and you're still in the process of grief, stay away from people that you don't need to exert energy on. You have enough energy going into your own mental health in your life. If somebody is not believing what you're saying and they are not choosing to invest positively in your life, don't worry about it. Just don't deal with it for a while. We've done that before. That's huge, right? You don't have the mental space. You're trying to function on a daily basis. You don't need to be wasting your energy or emotions on people that are going to bring you down, or that are going to make your situation worse or make you feel even more crazy. Don't do it. Don't do it.
I literally, this was one of the big things for me, and I cleansed my Facebook page of people that just seeing their post made me upset. I I was like, you know what? I'm cleansing anything in my life right now that's not going to help me. And anybody who I've spoken with who doesn't want to understand, you know, or makes me feel like it wasn't that big a deal of what we went through, I'm removing you right now, like temporarily until I can get better. And this was like, I'm better obviously today, but this was back then whenever I was recovering, you know, just, you don't have to remove them forever, just temporarily put them aside. So that way you can just focus on you and your family and your recovery, because those outside people can really just stall your progress or even push you back.
Yes. You just can't. And I'm thankful my husband has been on board with that. Still to this day is something we work through with Marcel, where we've gone to places and people are like, oh, well, you know, we still decided to have candles going, or we decided to keep flowers in the room. We knew you were coming. And if we find out before we go, he's like, well, I'm sorry, we're not coming. Like we're just not even going to we're not going to mess with it. Like we're just not. And I'm so thankful. I agree. It's not a permanent thing, but you have to do it for a little while. That's huge. And like you said earlier, like finding space for yourself. So I am horrible at this. It's something my husband unfortunately has to remind me of. But even like sitting, I journal, I write. I love writing. And so there are days too, he's like, I've got dinner, go write for a half hour. Like, oh, okay, I can do that. And I know we've talked before. I'm like, hey, I'll get to that in a little bit. I need to write for a half hour. Like I'm writing a short story. I just need to mentally clear my head and then I can regroup. And I think that's important. Like find something that you can not be distracted by, but that you can be distracted by, that helps you just feel like yourself for a little bit. Yeah.
Even if it's, you know, for me, one of the things that just always like kind of resets me is I love writing too, but for me, it was just laying in my bed and literally just looking out the window up into the sky and just like watching the clouds. Like that would reset me. I would just lay there and just look up at the sky, you know. So find whatever it is that helps you just be at peace, you know, to calm your thoughts.
Yes.
And
meditation. I mean, obviously, right? We'll throw those out there. Meditation is a big one. If you are dealing with suicidal thoughts, there is no shame in contacting a professional, like at all. Please do it. Tell somebody. I told my husband, and it literally changed the direction of the way we handled our family in a positive way, right? Like in a positive way. But talk to somebody if you're going through that. Anxiety, there are tools that you can do for that. Actually, Lauren was telling me for breathing for flight or fight mode, if you know you're going to flight and you're going to freak out and have an anxiety attack, if you breathe in and you breathe out for longer than you breathed in, it helps trick your brain into thinking that you can stay, that you don't need to panic. And I know that she told me that. So learn breathing techniques is a big one. I think those are the biggest tools for me that we've come across.
I was thinking, sorry. Sometimes you just gotta, you know, you want to take a glass and just throw it against the wall, and that's gonna make you feel better. Oh. If you replace that with a pillow,
yeah,
you're just I did kickboxing. You know,
I did kickboxing for a while just to make sure I could hit something.
Or you know, yeah. You know what would work for me whenever I would get like really upset and I was crying because I just, you know, because mold is making you feel this way. Like that's the thing. You have to remember that how you're feeling is greatly influenced about how mold is affecting you. Like this isn't you really feeling this way. It's mold like really doing this to you. And one thing my brother used to always tell me to go do, like whenever I was younger, like, you know, if I was upset and I didn't want to like, you know, I wanted to stop crying, but I was really upset. He was like, go watch yourself cry in the mirror. And it worked every single time.
I don't think I'd want to do that.
Yeah, you'll stop crying.
A counselor, when I was going through depression too, a counselor friend that we had told me to daily challenge my mind, find something to laugh at and cry to like help rebalance your mind. And it worked. I remember for like 3 months, it just worked. And it was stupid stuff that I laughed at, right? Like a cat video or one of the memes, now I look at the memes you guys send over and I just laugh, but it to like makes you still keep all of your emotions in check. So you still have all of your emotions.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. All right.
Great talk, Elizabeth.
I know. This was fun. People have questions, please message us, ask us. We can send over more resources on mental health, but we just wanted kind of a raw conversation, right?
Mm-hmm.